When I was younger, I just wanted to make my parents proud. So I did exactly what they asked me to do without too much pushback. I was a good girl. I got good grades. I barely got in trouble. And I stayed quiet. As I got older, I noticed that being quiet wasn't serving me. It wasn't helping me to become the best version of myself, my true self. And I wasn't showing up in the world fully how I was created to be. I was censoring myself. Success is measured by how you make those around you feel. And me being quiet wasn't making those around me feel anything. I asked myself, is this how you want to be remembered when you die? The quiet person in the corner that no one really knew? I know I'm not alone here, so I decided to change my tone. I am Shanice Miller, and welcome to my podcast, Do Less. Yes, that's right, do less. It used to be cool to work 60 hours a week, but the world has gotten smarter and realized why spend more time to make the same or less money. I help small business owners build systems and processes to help them scale and find more time for themselves and their families. I'm going to provide you the best practices and all the tools and tips to scale your business. Welcome to my show. Today, I'm bringing Beth on the show to share her experience on not showing up in the world how she was created to be. Beth Fisher is an engaging author, speaker, business leader, leukemia survivor, and marathoner. Wow, that's a lot. With a passion for helping women overcome adversity. She spent much of her life in constant struggle between living up to others' expectations and finding her true self. So today, she uses her own experiences to help other driven professional women align their outward communication skills with who they truly are inside, which is why I wanted her to share her journey with you. Beth, I am so glad that you're on the show today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I can't wait to talk to you.
Yes, I can't wait. I think this is going to be a really great episode, a really great topic, because as women in particular, I know we kind of quiet ourselves sometimes and we don't show up all the way as our authentic selves. So when was it that you were not showing up in the world how you were created to be?
Oh my goodness. I love this question. And it's also been a journey as it is for all of us. So it started when I was young because I grew up in a really small town in Northeast Ohio. It was literally a village, about 2,000 people maybe. And I just always felt different from the get-go, different in terms of I'm a question asker. Like I was always curious and I was always the girl in school who'd be like, well, who decided that? And whose idea was that? And do I have to listen to these things? And why is this teacher teaching? Because I don't think that they're teaching it right. And it didn't come from a place of I was just contrarian or I was trying to just be smart. You know, I was always like, well, who does she think she is? That was a question that really over time started to just really chip away at my soul, if I'm honest, because when people would say, well, who do you think you are, young lady? And I'm like, well, what does that even mean? I'm just trying to figure things out as a young lady or whatever. And people would feel uncomfortable. And I never came at my question asking with that intent. The older I've gotten, I realized we are equally, if not more responsible for our impact as much as we are our intent. But as a kid, you don't really know that. So I stopped asking questions because what it did basically is it isolated me. And people didn't want to give me the time of day. And so it was harder and harder to make friends and teachers and so forth. And I thought, well, if I'm just maybe quiet and I stop asking questions, will they like me more? Turns out that was true in a lot of cases, but did they really like me? Or did they like how I was acting? And I'm like, but this feels very duplicitous. It didn't feel at all like I was honoring myself and who I really was. And so I lost myself for a lot of years.
How did it feel when you lost yourself?
Disorienting. Sad is like a very cheap word to describe it, but it felt really just lonely. That's the word I would say. It felt like I was showing up in the world and people thought I was happy and people thought that I was the person that they liked and wanted to be around. Meanwhile, every single day I was sort of dying a little bit inside, a little bit at a time. And it just felt isolating and it felt like I was going in a direction where I didn't feel like I wanted to go. And I didn't know how to stop heading in that direction without causing a lot of other loneliness, right? So I had two choices to make, which was to continue going down this path and losing myself and feeling lonely inside, or going the direction I really wanted to go with the voice that I really had, with the questions I really had, with me, but losing those quote friendships. And that also felt like a lonely proposition.
Wow. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to really navigate and figure out, okay, do I speak up and ask the questions that I'm really curious about to learn more about the world and how it works around me? Or do I stay quiet to appease people because I was that pesky kid asking all these questions. And I mean, I had a similar experience where I saw the other kids getting in trouble, talking back, those things that you hear, kids should be seen, not heard when you're growing up. And so I just wanted to be that good kid. And I did not have all of that back talk or all of that, all of the things that a lot of the other kids, maybe some of the questions. I had a couple of questions, but for the most part, I just kept my head down and I was really quiet. And just like you, I realized that that quietness wasn't helping me to be who I was. I wasn't saying what was really on my mind. And I still struggle with that, to not say what's on my mind, because it's like, oh, I don't want to butt in and give this person unsolicited advice. That's how it shows up for me now. But before, it was kind of like, I don't want to get in trouble. So,
Yes. Yeah, there is something to that about trying to. I was also that way too. I wanted to be the girl that got the straight A's, that had all the affirmation, right? I'm a high D on the DISC profile. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I'm like the quote achiever mindset. And so I didn't want to let people down. I wanted to sort of play by the rules, but I also wanted to understand what the rules were and who put them in place, to begin with.
so who
And
did
my
put
whole
the rules in your place? Because it didn't sound like your parents. It sounded like teachers more so.
Oh, I would say honestly, Shanice, society. I would say, and this is going to sound terrible, but a lot of male patriarchy. That's really, I go down this whole path, and I had to learn, right, because there are so many good men in the world, but the misogyny for me was really hard to deal with, and so it was as if, at least in my generation, I grew up in the 80s, and it was one of those things where, as a Gen Xer, we were always told, hey, you can be the first generation of women. You can do anything you want to do, be anyone you want to be, but also kind of like latchkey kids, good luck. We're not going to tell you how to do it. We just know you can. And I was like, okay, I'll figure this out on my own. But every time I did it, it's interesting in retrospect, people are okay with you having a certain level of success until you get to a certain point. And then it's like, then they become uncomfortable with themselves and they start to think, well, are they surpassing me? And I'm like, again, based on what sort of, rating system, if you will. But my experience was always, it was harder for men for whatever reason in the business world, because I've always been a business mindset kind of person. And when I started out of college very young and was in the business world, sales and marketing for like 25 years, I will never forget. It sticks with me today, all these years later. A man said to me, well, it's a good thing you're pretty because you're not very smart.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh my
this was
gosh.
like, yeah, this was in the middle of, and my very first like week on the job, I was a kid. I was like 21 years old, and I'm wearing what I thought was supposed to be like women's wear. I'm wearing a business suit, and like, I'd rather be in sweats, but I was like, all right, I'm going to dress the part. I'm going to ask the questions. I really wanted to do a good job, to, our points about, well, I want to play by the rules. What are the rules? How do I do a good job here? How do I become a good team member? How do I do my job well? Well, I asked questions. And that was his response to me in the middle of a boardroom with about 10 other men and one other woman.
That's
And
pretty
the room,
embarrassing.
it was, and I hurt on the inside, but here's my voice. I immediately went to, he said, it's a good thing you're pretty because you're not very smart. And I said, well, I guess it's a good thing that you're smart. so, so, yeah.
And
And,
left it at that silence.
yeah. And people were like, did she just say that? And I thought in my head, I was like, did I just say that? But that's it, right? Self-preservation, defense mechanism. And it's almost a catch-22, a little bit of a trick bag, because as we are learning to defend ourselves, it's also so easy to get labeled, especially as a female, a professional woman, as bossy or other words, right? Like it's easy. Men get labeled as confident in their voices. If a man would have said that response, the room would have been in laughter and like, oh, this guy's cool. And for me, it was like, wow, she's mouthy. I'm like, no, I'm trying to defend myself here, because what did I even do to deserve that kind of comment in the first place? And shouldn't somebody be correcting him? That's really what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Over the course of my time, I've learned to help people through that, and I don't put up with that anymore.
Wow. Like I'd been labeled not a team player. So that was what it showed up for me. Oh, since you're speaking up, you're not being a team player. You're not going in with the grain. And that's a hard thing. I was in college when it was actually a female teacher who said that to me, a group of them. And I was really shocked and I was confused because I looked at the other girls around me as well. And it was like we had all done the same thing. But then they single one person out and it's like, oh, well, you're not being the team player. You're the one who needs to be quieter, who needs to censor yourself more. And it's not a good feeling. They actually like, for I guess my punishment, I was supposed to write this letter about what being a team player means. And like my letter was like so passive aggressive about how being a team player is not, bringing this one person, circling this young lady around a group of grown women, adults, like it was about 4 or 5 of them. They were all like, well, why did you do this? And I'm like, one person's supposed to be sitting here advocating for me, and she just wasn't.
Yeah, that's the word. I'm a huge proponent of female advocacy, especially in the workplace and in life in general, right? But to me, when I hear this story, obviously I wasn't there, but the first thing that comes to mind is you must have been obviously one of the smartest women in that room, because for a woman to tear you down, that means she's insecure. And this is what I have a daughter who's 26 and she's just entering the workforce. And those are a lot of her comments and feedback to me is like, Mom, why are these women so mean to me? I don't know what I'm doing, quote, wrong. What am I doing wrong that they're mean to me? And I said, give me an example. And she said, well, I walk really quickly and I get my work done really fast and I'm always just working and they are sort of sitting around kind of watching me. And I guess I'm making them feel uncomfortable because they're not doing the same level of work, right? So for me, I am able to finally, at this point in my life, advocate for other women because I'm confident with who I am. I know who I am now. I'm no longer that person who is not showing up as I'm created to be. I'm exactly who I am at all times, always. And I finally had to learn, and I'm okay with realizing that I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I don't need to be, right? I don't need to be, because for me, the only time in this world that any of us are not going to have negative comments said about us is if we're not doing anything in the world.
Yeah.
And that's not an option for me. We can't affect change. We can't stick up for societal injustices. We can't be the best versions of ourselves and be part of a team if we're on the sidelines. So for me, I'm going to get in the arena. And if somebody says something to me like, well, who does she think she is? I don't need to answer. To me, now that's rhetorical. I know who I am.
So how did you turn it around? Because, as a kid fresh out of college, I was in college. It's hard to stand up to a superior, to someone who is higher up, older, supposedly wiser than what you are. I had watched this one podcast and they talked about the difference between olders and elders. And I just loved it with Erica Williams. It was just I love the way she put it, because even though everyone gets older, you're not quite an elder. You're just older. But how did you turn it around for yourself to realize like what all these people are telling me isn't true? It shouldn't impact my self-esteem, because, for a while after all those women came around and they went against me, even though I had that courage and that strength to speak up for myself, exactly what you said, they were trying to beat me down. They were saying I was at the top of my class and they were telling me they don't think that I was ready and had the skill level to take my boards. A person at the top of their class,
Yeah.
but they don't have the skill level. And I told the lady, she was just like, I don't think that you will be able to sign up for it. I said, I already did.
There you go. Yep.
So,
Yep.
and it's like, what else can you say? Like, you're telling me that I'm not going to be able to. I had these facts behind me, but I could just imagine being someone who didn't already sign up. Now you're second guessing yourself. How did you get across that?
Yeah. For me, it was a few things. One is I became a mom, and I was a young mom. I had Olivia when I was 23, and I started to realize and recognize that the things that I would tell her about how I envisioned her showing up in the world and the way to show up in the world, and that she had mattering and value and worth, and she's enough just as she is. I thought, I'm saying these words and I believe these words to be true, but am I living like this? And it felt a little duplicitous. It felt a little bit like I was being a giant hypocrite, like telling her one thing, but I was living a different way when I would be at work or other places. And I thought, this isn't right. I know what I'm saying is accurate. And I'm saying this to her because I love that little girl unconditionally. And that kind of made me tear up. I'm like, but am I loving myself unconditionally? Or am I hanging on to all of that past sort of regret of bad choices or things that people said or the trauma of feeling left out, or pick a thing? Am I really living that past life? And how is that stopping me and blocking me from all the things that are waiting for me? So it was a matter of just sort of coming to reconciliation of those two things, but also boundaries. And what I mean by that is there are certain things in this world that I will put up with and put up with and put up with. And then certain things that just, I will say, trigger me to the point where I was like, that is it. That's enough. Right. And for me, it was walking into an office and I was in sales, as I mentioned, and having a man who's sitting behind the quintessential like boardroom desk, feet up on the desk. And I walk in, and again, you can't make it up. A lot of the stuff you just sticks with you for certain comments that are made. And he said, wow, well, with legs like that, I'll buy anything you're selling. And I just looked at, because I was married, right? First of all, right? I mean, what a line that was. But it infuriated me to the point in that moment that my words left my mouth before I could catch them. And I said, well, what do you think your wife would say about you speaking to me like that? Because I saw you had a wedding ring on. And he was just like, well, and I said, no, honestly. I said, because if my husband spoke to anybody like you just spoke to me, I wouldn't be married to him anymore. This is not okay. So on some level, I brought in that advocacy because I never met this person, in my life, certainly not his wife, but I felt like we were bonding. Like I was sticking up for another woman in the world. And that to me is how I'm wired. I'm wired about injustices. And that to me felt like a giant injustice. Like, look, buddy, you're going to go home to a woman and you just spoke to another woman like this. This is not okay. And when I left that office, I was still young. I was maybe 25 or 26. As I was walking, I felt a little shaky on my feet, like, ooh, how could I speak to a CEO like this? But then I just felt a sense of peace, like, yeah, that's exactly how I could speak to somebody like that because he deserved it. Like, this is not okay. And if I don't stick up for myself and other women and other people who are being wronged, who's going to do it, right? So I felt a little bit better in that moment, feeling more confident that, well, like the world didn't end. I still have my job. I didn't get fired. Maybe he'll change. Maybe he won't. But I did what I needed to do in that moment. And every time thereafter something came at me like that, I just used my voice. Now, what I will say is the older I've gotten, maybe the little less reactionary I've become. I maybe say things not as quickly out of my mouth. I'm a little more strategic in what I say versus emotional in what I say. But I still get the point across. And I read the room well enough to know, finally, through experience, like this matters and this battle is worth fighting or not. And the last thing I'll say about it is I live by this mantra. And you mentioned it earlier, like the woman who said, you're top of your class and this is what they're saying. And for you, I love what you said was, I already signed up, because my mantra is this: never argue with a fool, because onlookers won't be able to tell the difference. Mark Twain, right? Which is like, why would we have to defend ourselves? It's like arguing a false negative. It's like, why do I have to tell you that I'm smart? Look, I'm at the top of my class. Why do I have to answer this? And I'm not going to lower myself or my standards to even get sucked into this conversation, because the second that we do that, we do lose a little bit of ourselves and we become lesser versions of ourselves.
Yeah, you're so true. So true. And I love everything that you just said about that, because it is true. And sometimes in the moment, we feel like, that lesser version of ourselves. We don't feel confident enough to speak up for ourselves. Or, some of us, I've heard friends, they're just like, you're so quick on your toes. And later in life, yes, I am quicker on my toes. And like you said as well, that, when now you're thinking more strategically, I think more strategically about what to say, what not to say, how to say it a little bit better, and trying not to censor myself in all of those ways. Do you have a specific time when you didn't use your voice to advocate for yourself?
Oh, yeah, certainly in college and relationships. Yeah, in circumstances I never should have been in. And, on the other side of that, what happens is we have experiences that we wish we would never have, right? And I know that this, from a female perspective, often happens, whether it's a physical or emotional assault. Um, it happens way more than it needs to. Uh, as a female, we are the recipients of all sorts of behavior, and when we don't use our voice, when we don't say this is not okay, then bad things happen to us, and they stick with us for really for perpetuity. Like for the rest of my life, I will remember those times when I was a young girl and I didn't have enough self protection like mechanisms in place. And honestly, it came from a place of me thinking I wasn't worth it. Like, oh well, this is what I deserve. I guess this guy can do whatever he wants. He can say whatever he wants, do whatever he wants. He can think whatever he wants because maybe he's right. Maybe I am all of those labels. And I literally wrote a book about this. It's called Remorseless: Learning to Lose Labels, Expectations, and Assumptions Without Losing Yourself. I lost myself because I succumbed to the labels everybody else applied to me, and whether they were positive or negative. And what happens is when you hear, especially from a person in your life who's supposed to be a trusted mentor, advisor, intimate partner, when you hear somebody tear you down enough times that is supposed to be a trusted person in your life, you start to go, they must be right because they're supposed to love me. And when you hear that enough times and you start to believe it and question yourself, then your voice becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually it's gone, and you just then accept the labels that are put on you like it's a package sent to the wrong address.
Yeah, that's so
There's
true.
there's no return to sender because you said, well, okay, I'll take this. The only way to not accept that label is to say, I don't accept it. I am not those things. But you got to believe that first before you can say them.
Mhm. So, how do you define your true self today?
Someone who's loving and someone who is okay with actually now being loved. For a long time, I wasn't. So I am a very loving person who wants to accomplish a lot of things in the world, and I do so unapologetically. And I don't because I'll tell you what I want to accomplish in the world isn't about me. I would say I today am much more selfless as opposed to selfish. Those goals that I had, those checklists ever since I was a little girl in fourth grade, like, oh, I want to be an Olympian and I want to be a truck driver and I want to be the first Supreme Court justice. I want to do all the things. I finally today realized that was to fill a very deep void. So today I would define myself as somebody who's at peace. Like I am okay no matter what I'm quote doing, and I'm okay with being.
I love that. And that was actually my gratitude prompt for today. So I said I was grateful for being at peace this morning. So I'm so glad that that came back around full circle, and it was kind of like a affirmation that that is being at peace with me today. So the world, as we know, is very loud. It's very noisy. It's always telling us what we should or should not do. And what we need is to just focus on the things that we really want in a system to keep us on track in the right direction for accomplishing exactly what it is that you want. Now, I use a system where I write out my big goal that I want to accomplish in the next 90 days. And then each day, I write out 3 micro goals that I need to complete daily that's going to get me closer towards the bigger 90-day goal. And that way, I'm staying focused and not distracted on what the world or someone else wants me to do. So, what I want for you to do is to write down a 90-day goal that you have. And each day, write out 3 micro goals that you need to accomplish to get you closer to finishing your 90-day goal. So, Beth, if someone wants to learn more about how you are your incredible self and your services, what you do, how can they find you?
Thank you. The best way is on my website, Beth Fisher, BethFisher.com.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
This has been an amazing episode of Do Less with me, Shanice Miller. Share this episode with anyone who needs to hear this today. Leave a 5-star rating and review. And remember, if you're an entrepreneur and you need to do less in your business, click the link in the description to work with me.